Hello one and all, this is Soulful Lordy, James Bullock, once again, this time around, DNF Duel Open Beta Review for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, for a game that is set to be released in the summer of 2022 on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and PC. DNF Duel is the 2D fighter spin-off of the DNF Online game that was released back in 2005. It is a beat-em-up MMO with RPG elements that has a plethora of different types of characters that have been implemented in this game. Instead of having unique names, they're actually named after the classes they're associated with in the DNF Online game. So it's a little bit easier to explain what these characters do and what they're about. With this game being developed by Arc System Works, it's easy to see the design choices that has been associated with their other games like Guilty Gear Strive, Dragon Ball Fighters, and of course Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. And the reason I bring up the latter is because this game reflects that from a gameplay perspective more than, say, Guilty Gear, with a control setup that has the player utilizing either a light attack, which is standard A medium attack, which is standard B, a heavy attack, which is associated with the skill button, and the special attack button, which is the MP skill button. Players can pull off combos with light or medium strikes to set up even bigger attacks with their special skills that deplete the MP bar that is located underneath the HP gauge. Now this bar does refill as the match progresses, but the best way to refill it is by going forward and landing attacks. Like Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, this game also has two options when it comes to blocking. You can either hold down the block button, or you can hold back on the directional pad or analog stick. The thing about this game, very much like Grand Blue Fantasy Versus when it comes to the gameplay, is how casual friendly it feels for a fighter. It feels like one of those games that you can jump in and do a lot of cool stuff without really learning too much about the characters. But as you progress, as you play a little bit more, you become aware of their strategies and what works best for them. It's a very interesting balance that works really well, and pulling in players that may not be experts at fighting games or may not be big fighting game aficionados, but do enjoy just the frenetic nature of a fighting game without having to really break their mind and trying to understand how these characters work. But you will actually see progression as you play. There was a great example of this in one fight where I was playing a person that obviously didn't know what they were doing. They were just mashing buttons, and I was mashing buttons alongside them because I was having fun just doing it. As I said, it's one of those games where you can pull off a lot of cool stuff without really working that hard. So we were both just mashing buttons and having a great, entertaining fight. But by the third fight, it was obvious the opponent actually started to get the hang of how to play with this character and started doing things that were a lot more strategic. So in turn, I had to really up my game if I wanted to beat this person because they were playing strategically and now I had to. It was amazing to witness this moment of essentially a light bulb going off in the player's mind that I couldn't see, and noticing how they had adapted to playing with this character in the middle of a fight. And one of the reasons for this learning curve being so different compared to other fighting games, especially when it comes to open betas, is the fact this game only had the player option online. You had no practice mode, you had no tutorial, you had no training room, you had no offline versus, so you had to pretty much just go into the heat of battle and find out what worked and what didn't. And that meant for the first day or so I was getting thrashed to and fro because I did not know what I was doing. I did not know who I was enjoying to play with. Even though I did enjoy playing with each character, they felt really unique, they felt really fun, and I could see why every player would have a different favorite because all feel viable depending on how well you utilize them. For me personally, the Hitman became my go-to character by the end of the beta. His close and mid-range attacks, and of course the ability to really dash in quicker than some other fighters, made him a lot more enjoyable to play with, especially against certain Berserker players or Crusader characters. I also enjoyed the short-range nature of the Striker, specifically because of the combos she could pull off in short nature in these bursts. And of course there was the Crusader, who became pretty much the worst person in the world when it came to a lot of gamers because of its long-range attacks. Even though he's really slow, he is incredibly powerful. He can really enclose an area with his wall attack. Now, as I mentioned, The only available options when it came to gameplay modes was the player mode, and this also introduced one of my biggest pet peeves when it came to this game, and that is the room system. Just like Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, the room system is based on having an avatar running around, setting up fights via the arcade machines that are located. Of course, when it came to this game being an open beta, there were definitely a lot of connectivity issues when it came to trying to start a fight. There were moments when my avatar actually just got stuck when I was trying to move around the room, and I couldn't move until I exited the game and restarted it. And then there were the moments that were the most disheartening, and that was the fact that you would see this notification come up in the middle of a fight, buttery smooth fight, everything's going well, and then you would see this notification, you've been disconnected from the room. Now, I don't have a full explanation as to why that happened, only the assumption that the room closed up because the hosting player has left the room. And if that is the case, that is a problem that needs to be fixed before the full game is released, because that is a crushing blow to anyone that is having a great fight like I had. I had several great fights that were interrupted because of this disconnect issue. Now, if it wasn't because of the host player leaving, then they have to find out what the problem was, because once again, very disheartening, very discouraging, and very upsetting, because you could be having a great fight with someone that you found is on your skill level or is up for playing a series of fights, and then next thing you know, you're disconnected. As I mentioned, thankfully the netcode was very good. There were a few laggy fights here and there, but a majority of them were really smooth, and I had no real problem with the latency and input delay when it came to this game. Overall, I had no idea how much I would enjoy this game when I came into the beta. I really didn't know much about it. I didn't know much about the franchise, and the only thing that kind of attracted me to the idea of playing it was the fact of its developer. Thankfully, after having time with the open beta, they changed me. They have gotten me excited for DNF Duel. I'm hoping that they do another open beta down the road, because this is a very fun game. I'm intrigued to see what kind of story mode and offline modes they have. I'm intrigued to see how ranked works. I'm intrigued a lot about what this game has to potentially offer, beyond the fact that the gameplay itself is so fun and so enjoyable and so shockingly intuitive for both casuals and hardcore gamers. They have definitely won me over, and I'm excited about the full release. I'm hoping for another open beta, but until then, I'll just be happy with what I got so far. So there you have it. This has been Soulful Lordy, James Bullock, once again, DNF Duel Open Beta Review for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. For a game that is set to be released in the summer of 2022 on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and PC. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back and watch some footage and just hope and pray that we do get another beta, because I want to play more of this. And if they have to make me wait until the summer to play any more of DNF Duel, I guess I'll have no choice but to say, oh lordy.